Hey everybody, this video is where we start putting the rules of exponents to use. We're going to start multiplying binomials. So we'll talk a little bit about, I'm going to remind you of distributing, but in this video, we're going to kind of get into one of those huge, really big and important concepts of algebra. So as you're working your way through this video, please feel free to pause, rewind, replay, do whatever you need to do to really make sure that you're understanding these examples. This concept is something you are going to use throughout the rest of your high school math career. So if any concept has been important to this point, I can tell you that this is one of those heavy hitters. All right, enjoy the video. Okay, so multiplying binomials. So when we have a binomial means two terms. Okay, when we've had terms in the past, if we've had something like 2 times x plus 3, well, this is a monomial times a binomial. This is the monomial, and this is the binomial. When we have a monomial times a binomial, we distribute. If I can spell, we distribute. So we multiply the 2 times the x to give us 2x, and we multiply the 2 times the 3 to give us 6 plus 6. So that is a monomial times a binomial. But when we have two binomials, I'll write it over here on the left, something like x plus 2 times x plus 3, we have to make sure that we're multiplying every term inside the first set of parentheses times every term in the second set of parentheses. So the way we do that is to use this distributing method that we refer to as foiling. So we're just going to read through this part here. It says to multiply binomials, distribute each term in the first binomial to each term in the other binomial, then combine like terms. This order of distributing is frequently referred to as the FOIL method. So what does FOIL stand for? Well, it stands for first, outer, inner, and last. So what that means is we're going to multiply. I'm actually going to erase all those lines because we're going to talk through it with color. So first, this F here is talking about the first term in the first set of parentheses, multiplying it by the first term in the second set of parentheses. So the first is multiplying this A times C. That's my first. Then I'm going to look at my outer. So this O stands for outer, and that means I've got my outside term in the first set of parentheses and my outside term in the second set of parentheses. Those are my outer terms, the ones on the far outside of everything we're multiplying. So I'm going to multiply, in this case, it's the A times the D. That gives me A times D. So the first was A times C, and the second is A times D. The inner here is the inside terms. So if A and D were my inside terms, that means that B and C are my inside. If I look at those parentheses as kind of the outside shell, well, the terms way on the inside are going to be my B and C terms, the ones closest to each other. So inner is going to be B times C right there. Then we've got the last term. So the last two terms are the second term in each of the binomials. So in this case, it's the B, that's that last term in the first binomial, times the D, which is the last term in the second binomial. So when I multiply those, I have B times D, or just BD. So once I've done multiplying all of these, the first, the outer, the inner, and the last, we then have to go through and look at each of those, AC, AD, BC, and BD. Now those are going to have numbers and different variables, and see if there's anything we can combine using our rules of like terms and combining variables. So there are quite a few steps, but once you get the hang of it, you will be able to do this without even really thinking about it. So that is your introduction to FOIL. And now we're going to jump into some examples. Okay, so the best way to practice foiling and multiplying binomials, remember two terms, the best way to do this is to just look at examples. So I'm going to step you through, I believe it's 4 examples in this video, and then hopefully you should be able to do the rest of the worksheet on your own. So we're talking about foiling, right? That's the mnemonic we're going to use to remember. So we're going to start with f out of the FOIL. So with f, we're going to multiply our first terms. So the first terms are the first term in the first set of parentheses and the first term in the second set of parentheses. So that's going to be x times x. Remember, when we multiply terms that have the same base, we add their exponents. So these have an exponent of 1, so that's going to give us x squared. So that's our first term, plus. Now we're going to move on to O in FOIL, which is the outer terms. So our outer terms are our first term in the first binomial and the second term in the second binomial, the ones that are on the way outside of both of the parentheses. So we have x times 4. Well, we've got, remember there's a 1 technically in front of that x, so 4 times 1 is 4. So this gives us 4x plus. Now we're going to move on to the I in FOIL. So that's here for inner, which means we're going to take the two terms that are closest to each other on the middle of this set of binomials, which is the 2 and the x. When I multiply 2 times x, I get 2x. And then I'm going to move on to L, which is last. So the last two terms in the binomial, which is the 2 times the 4. Those are the two last terms. So this is going to be plus 2 times 4 gives us 8. So now you've taken care of all of the multiplying pieces. Now what we have to remember is to combine like terms. So first step is to FOIL. Second step is to combine like terms. Now remember, in the beginning of the year, we talked about combining like terms. They have to have the same variable, they have to have the same exponent. Those are those like terms. So the two terms that are like, or that we can combine here, are 4x and our 2x. Because the variables are the same and they have the same exponent, those are both an exponent of 1, we can combine those together. So when we bring this down, the x squared can't get combined with anything, that stays by itself. Then we get plus. Like terms, we leave the variable alone, but we add their coefficients. So 4 plus 2 is 6. This gives us 6x plus 8. The 8 can't get combined with anything. So this is your final answer. When you're asked to multiply those two binomials, we end up with a 3-term trinomial, x squared plus 6x plus 8. So for example 2, we're going to do exactly the same thing. Oops, here we go. So we're going to multiply through. We're going to start with first in FOIL. We're going to start with the f. So the first means I'm going to multiply the first two terms, the 2x times the x. When I do that, these both have an exponent of 1, so I'm going to end up with 2x squared. When I multiply variables that are the same, I add their exponents together. Next, I'm going to move into outer, which is the O in FOIL. So I'm going to be multiplying the outermost terms. So the 2x times the negative 5. So what I end up when I multiply that, 2 times negative 5 gives us negative 10x. Plus, now I'm going to do my inner. First outer, inner. I'm doing the I in FOIL. So the inner terms are the 1 times the x, which is just 1x. And then I'm going to move on to the L. Oops, blue. I'm going to move on to the L for last. So that's the 1 times the negative 5. Those are my last two terms in each binomial. So 1 times negative 5 gives us, we'll do plus a negative 5. All right, so now I FOILed. I did step 1. Now I have to do step 2, which was to combine like terms. So the two terms that are the same are the negative 10x and the 1x. So I'm going to rewrite this. The 2x squared comes down, that stays, plus negative 10x plus 1x. So those are opposite signs. I'm going to subtract. That gives me negative 9x. And then the 5 stays the same, plus a negative 5. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rewrite this so it's a little more correct. So what this ends up being, I've got 2x squared plus a negative, we actually want to write as the minus 9x. The plus negative 5 we're also going to write as minus 5. So it's fine as you're working if you want to write plus the negative. That's fine with me, it doesn't bother me, but when you write your final answer, you really should change those plus negatives to a minus sign. It's just a little more correct for a final answer. So it's going to be the final answer for example number 2. All right, and here is problem number 1 after those 2 first examples. So we're going to go through exactly the same way, following the same steps, and hopefully by the end of this video, you guys are going to feel totally confident to do numbers 3 through 10 even on your own. So again, we're going back to the F for first. The first terms are the y times y. Y times y is going to give me, I'm actually going to move that down a little bit. Y times y is going to give me y squared. Then we're going to outer. So outer is going to be the y, my first, times my last. Y times 1 is going to be plus y. Now we're going to move on to the inner. Inner is going to be the 2 terms closest to each other. So that's going to be plus 8 times y is 8y. And then for last, which is my L out of FOIL, I do the last term in both. So 8 times 1 gives me plus 8. Now I have to combine like terms. Remember, step 1 was FOIL. We did that. Step 2 is combine like terms. So we're going to add together y and 8y because those have the same variable. So we have y squared plus, this is a 1 out in front, making this 9y plus 8. We have now combined like terms. Everything is as simplified as it can be. That is the final answer for number 1. Please make sure that as you're going through these examples, if you need to rewind or pause or review anything that's presented, please make sure you do so. These videos are for you to help you understand these concepts as much as possible. So please make sure you're using the videos to your best to the best of your abilities. All right, and on to number 3. So we're going to start with our first terms. First terms, x times x to give us x squared. Plus O for outer. Outer is going to be the x times negative 4. So x times negative 4 is going to give us negative 4x plus. Then we're going to move on to the inner terms. So inner is going to be negative 10 times x to give me negative 10x plus. Then lastly, we're going to do last. So that is negative 10 times negative 4. Remember, a negative times a negative is a positive, so 10 times 4 is 40. Step 1 was to FOIL is done. Step 2, combine like terms. So we're going to have negative 4x plus negative 10. We're going to put those together. So we have x squared plus, so negative 4x plus negative 10, the signs are the same, so I am going to add those together. Negative 14x plus 40. Now remember, on the second example, we said we really don't want to have plus and negative next to each other if we can avoid it. So we're going to rewrite that. So we have equals x squared minus 14x plus 40. And again, when you guys are working, if having plus and negative is helpful for you, totally fine. But just for your final answer, please remember to try to take out those plus and negatives and put in that minus sign. So that is the answer for number 3. Feel free to pause, rewind, or fast forward as necessary. Then we're going to move on to number 5. Same thing, we're going to go through the same process. We're going to start with foiling with our F term. So that is the first in each. So the first term in each one is the 4 times the x. So we're going to start out with that is equal to 4x squared. Moving on to the outer terms, that's the 4x times the 3. So 4x times 3 gives us 12. So this becomes 12x. Inner is going to be the negative 7 times x. So that will be plus negative 7x. And then we've got our last terms. So that's going to be negative 7 times a positive 3. So that gives us plus negative 7 times a positive 3 gives us a negative 21. Step 1 done. Step 2 was combine like terms. So that's our 12x and our negative 7x. We bring down the 4x squared, that doesn't change, plus, so 12x plus a negative 7x is the same as 12x minus 7x. So that's going to give us a positive 5x because the 12 was bigger, so that's going to keep the sign, plus a negative 21. We've got our plus and negative right here, so we're just going to rewrite. So our final answer for this one is going to be 4x squared plus 5x minus 21. And that will be the final answer. On to number 7. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to start by foiling. So we're going to start with our first terms. So that's the 3y times 3y. Now here, not only do we combine the exponents of the y's, which we are going to do, but we also multiply those coefficients. So 3 times 3 is 9. Y times y is y squared. So you want to make sure you're doing both of those parts when you're multiplying those terms. Then we're going to move on to our outer terms. So 3y times 2, we multiply the 3 and the 2. That's going to give us 6y. Plus, now we're doing our inner. So that's going to be 1 times 3y to give us plus 3y. And then we'll do our last terms, which is 1 times 2. 1 times anything is just itself, so this will be plus 2. Step 1 was to FOIL. Step 2 is to combine like terms. So step 1 is done. We're going to combine those like terms to give us 9y squared plus 9y plus 2. There's nothing here that can be simplified, so this will actually be our final answer. All right, so this is the last problem for the video. So hopefully by now foiling is feeling fairly comfortable to you. It is one of those concepts that the more you do it, the more comfortable you will get with it. So please keep practicing. To go along with the notes video, you're going to have that other half, those even problems to do as well. So just keep practicing, but make sure you're reaching out early if anything is feeling confusing to you. All right, so last time through, we're going to start with the F for first. So we're going to have the first terms are the 8h and the 3h. 8 times 3 is 24, and h squared. So we multiply the 8 times the 3, and then the h times the h to give us the h squared. Then we're going to move on to the outer terms. So that's the 8h times the negative 1. So negative 1 times 8h would give us negative 8h. Plus, we're going to do our inner terms now. That's the negative 3 times 3h. So negative 3 times 3 gives us a negative 9h. And then we're going to move on to the last. So that's the negative 3 times negative 1. Negative 3 times negative 1. Negative times a negative gives us a positive, so this will stay a positive 3. Step 1 is done. That was our foiling. Step 2, combine like terms. So we're going to combine negative 8h and negative 9h. We're going to bring down the 24h squared. Now, negative 8h plus negative 9h. The signs are the same, so I am going to combine them. 8 plus 9 is 17, but they're both negative, so it's going to stay negative. Negative 17h plus 3. Now, just to make sure we're writing these in the most appropriate way, we want to make sure we don't have plus and negative, so we're going to rewrite this as equals 24h squared minus 17h plus 3. And that is going to be your final answer for number 9. So again, please use this video as much as you need to. Feel free to rewind. If there's anything that I left out that you need some clarification on, just reach out, let me know. But hopefully you guys find this helpful and feel good to move on with those other examples. I hope you're doing well, and please, as always, reach out if you have any questions. Take care.